Hey everyone, it's me again. So today I wanted to tell you guys about the most remarkable times in my life, the most remarkable moments in my life. I haven't had a lot of time to think about them, but I thought, whatever, I'm just going to make a video and describe whatever comes to mind. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I remember I was in a group home and I was in utter despair because my life at home had been so much better. My mom was a caring mom, and I had friends at home, and I was in a group home when I was 8 or 9, and they had put me on risperidone. I couldn't sleep properly. I was always crying, and I remember there are times either at this place called Blooming Acres, a group home like a farm, or when I was at this other place called Youthdale. I remember reaching out, and I was being restrained, and I was on my stomach, and I was reaching out for my mom and crying, and she was she didn't know what to do. So, and the staff members were telling her to oh, just distance yourself. It's all okay. It'll all be fine. So that's one of the most remarkable times. The second one is, I guess, the first time I smoked weed. I felt like balls of mud were rolling down my body, and I was melting into the ground, and I thought I was gonna die. And then I had an out-of-body experience where a ghost body separated from the real body, and I walked around myself, and there was a little bit of synesthesia going on during that trip as well. Like I could see these colored shapes in the air three-dimensionally, and they had sounds associated with them. There's these other times I got high on weed where I felt like I was free falling faster and faster, and there was this bouncing sound that came each time I fell, and it would speed up faster and faster and faster, exponentially. And I would just get so fucking high, I didn't know where I was. I was on the chair just laughing my ass off. Which brings me to the first time I got high on Salvia. I smoked it, I exhaled, and it was 10x, and suddenly I noticed these two pink icicles in the air, and there was this freeze frame of what I was in, and I just started falling in this frozen segment of my life. I was free falling. I started falling faster and faster and faster, and it was like this exponential fall into deja vu, and it was fucking nuts. I remember I was bouncing around and falling and stretching and compressing, and then the door was 20 feet in the air, 10 meters in the air, and I was hallucinating. I hallucinated a small pink merry-go-round, and I remember telling my dad, asking him if he wanted to leave the gingerbread house or the candy house. I think it was the candy house, because I couldn't find a better word to describe what I was seeing other than a candy house. And that leads me to some other experiences I had on Salvia. There was one time where I was a slave. I was on alcohol at the time, and I decided to get high on Salvia. And so I was in this fiberglass filled vent in a factory, and then I became this slave that was pushing a 5-spoked wheel around with other slaves that were wearing berets and overalls, and I was one of them. And in front of me there was this trap door that was opening, and the slaves were falling through, and I ended up falling through it, and I don't remember what happened. This other time I was on Salvia, I woke up, and I woke up from this dream that I was in, that was reality, and I think I was naked, and I was strapped by my wrists and my ankles to um, to other people's wrists and ankles, and I was the only one who was awake. Everyone else was like sleeping, and we formed this net of humans that were all strapped to each other, kind of like enslaved. And um, I remember that. I also remember like these weird. I barely remember these really weird experiences I had on Salvia. One time, um, well, here's something really fucked up. I suggest you never try this because, well, it's just the stupidest thing you could do. I was watching porn and I was like, yeah, let's get high on salvia and see what porn's like. And I got high on it, and suddenly I was like, whoa, whoa, like fuck, like this is way too intense. And like salvia is something that you should really prepare. Like you should know that it's going to be intense, that it's going to be hard to handle, that you're going to be in a state that you're not aware of. Because like fuck, if you just use it for fun, you're going to find yourself eventually one day you'll use it and you'll find yourself like just, you know, you'll be scared to death because you'll be fucked up beyond compare, beyond anything you can relate to. Same with other drugs like DMT, LSD, ibogaine, whatever, mushrooms even. Um, so I remember from salvia experiences, like one time the side, I think there was this passageway, the side of my wall, sorry, the one of the walls of my room was like opened, and I was being carried by these beings through this passage and into this like bigger area. It was like a kingdom, and these beings were carrying me and separating my limbs from each other. Like they were taking my limbs off and my head off and my body, and my spirit like shot out. And one of the most intense experiences was when I was on Salvia, and I think I was on 30X, and I was just this like pink grain of rice, just like falling through this void, and I didn't have any sense of identity or anything. Also, another intense experience I had was on DXM. I was on 450 milligrams. That's 30 of these red gel caps. And as it kicked in, I felt like I was having this allergic reaction. And I started having choppy vision and double vision. And I looked in the mirror and my head was like inflating. And I remember I started feeling really hot and there were these red splotches on my body. And so I like went to the washroom, got undressed, got into my bathtub, turned the water on. I was like testing myself, seeing if I could see properly. And I was like putting my hand into the water and making some splashes. And I had this like mild tunnel vision where everything was like rotating over and over again. And I remember that being an intense experience. Also, one of the first times I got high on weed, I was in a forest with a good friend of mine, and as I got high, I started to see my reality as this three-dimensional visual field. Two dimensions were like I was seeing in individual frames that came like one by one, and I remember like as I was walking with my friend, I kept walking into the next frame, and like two dimensions were space, and one dimension was like the progression of events, basically a form of time, I think. And there were these like pink bubbles rising from everything, and everything was like amplified, like every direction. If I saw like if there was something coming at me from the left, it would be like really left. If there was something coming at me towards the right, like this, it would be like really coming at me. Um, yeah, I had some crazy experiences on even weed, but mostly salvia, and once or twice even DXM, which is cough syrup. Honestly, with the DXM, I find that it's a low quality drug. It does a lot of damage, and it feels like you're really fucked up. Like people talk about DXM as being like tripping balls. Personally, I see it as just being really fucked up and hallucinating. It's not really like tripping. Um, so there's oh, and being in the hospital once, I was in psychosis and I saw myself, like a reflection of myself, melting, and I was in total horror. I was like in total trauma, and I saw myself like melting. My skull was melting, and I was really fucked up. I was in psychosis. So that's a bunch of my, a bunch of experiences that really had an impact on my life. One time I was on mescaline and I had smoked 2 bowls of weed. After the first bowl, I saw these like symbols in my vision with this rising buzz, this rising effect. And then I smoked the second bowl and I was blasting through space. And as that was happening, I suddenly started feeling like this over intensity, and the door in front of me became like really like this like weird shape, like this, I don't know what to call it, like, and yeah, I remember like thinking that my whole life had been hallucinated, and I was just in this gray prison cell hallucinating my whole life. And so these are all experiences that defined who I am, that, uh, had a real impact on my life. There are some other ones, probably some beautiful ones that I haven't mentioned, but that's the story for today. Thanks. Peace out.